Hello, let's continue our journey, our journey. And today we're going to talk about fear. And especially we will understand how the criteria actually we received can help us to really understand how we can deal with our emotions. So I'm going to share with you an image. It's a nice image. Again, the story of fear. We'll try to look deep inside. So, as we said in the module on the relationships between thoughts and feelings, there is a relationship. Of course, there are two extremes. One extreme is when I think that, every feeling should be overanalyzed. That's problematic. Another extreme is that I think, or when I think that there is nothing really to see in our feelings. But you can see the video for that module. So there is tendentially a relationship between feelings, especially deep emotional or reactions, and perception, inner perceptions, inner beliefs that we have within us. So it's very important to make this kind of journeys, a journey, to do this kind of journey from our feelings to our thoughts. So let's try to tell the story. Fear. On the one side, fear reveals a desire. Yeah, there is a relationship between fears and desires. You can think about that. There is a deep connection between fear and desire. If I am afraid of something, it often means that in some way I desire the opposite. Of course, if I'm afraid, for example, that the relationship fails, it's because I desire that it can grow. Of course, we will see there's a possibility that we can also fear what is good. We will see in a few steps. So there is this relationship. At the same time, what can happen? Uh, uh, of course, that's another expression or explanation of what I said. I'm afraid because deep down I care. For example, some forms of fear or some manifestations of fear are really deeply healthy. They help us recognize real danger and avoid it because fear is connected to the perception of a danger. If why are we afraid of falling? Because we desire the opposite. We desire to leave. So fear is connected to this perception of a danger. We perceive something as a danger and we say, no, that's problematic because we desire the opposite or, a certain thing, goal thing. So it's very important when the danger is a real danger, it's very important to recognize it. And fear helps us. She actually, she helps us a lot. It helps us a lot. It makes a great service. What can happen? Where is the problem? Or the theme? Theme is the theme of discernment. Problem in a neutral sense, something that is there to be looked at deep inside. Fear calls to discernment because it's connected to a perception, the perception of a danger. So that's the point. Our perceptions of dangers can be sometimes distorted. That's the theme. Sometimes we perceive dangers that are real dangers. Sometimes we perceive in a distorted way into senses, in the sense that we perceive um, in an exaggerated way. For example, we think that some dangers are too big, we overestimate them, or in the sense that we perceive as danger what is not danger, and the opposite, we don't perceive as danger what it is. And I'll make now some examples. It's very important because it's very connected to the ways we elaborate our experiences, the model or the thoughts of the heart help us. So the root of fear. The root of fear or the echo fear may be the echo of an authentic perception of a real danger or of a distorted perception shaped by beliefs, wounds, past experiences, and it can keep us trapped and far from life. I make now an example. I remember some confusion, you know. I remember a guy that after a disillusion in love, he convinced actually himself that love doesn't exist. So uh, it was this conviction was unconscious. On a conscious basis, yeah, I just tried to 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 cultivate some, you know, superficial relationships, and he thought that it was okay, so that he found his peace deep down, and he could get in touch with this deep conviction in the space of listening, the space listen to him deeply was influenced by this inner belief love doesn't exist. After this terrible disillusion, if this story could fail, love doesn't exist. Then, in the space of the talk, actually, he also experienced a kind of development. He listened deeper, and uh, more deeply in himself, and he said, "No, maybe love exists, but it's not for me." It's even more terrible with a conviction, distorted perception. So what happens if I think that love doesn't exist, or that it's not for me? It happens that when true love, comes as a possibility, as an opportunity, for example, a person who is genuinely interested to me, I can be scared, have fear, mm, with many nuances, because I think that that manifestation of love is a danger. These are the starting perception. So when the perception of the damage is tendentially realistic, fears helps us a lot. I make just, here an example. For example, uh, something is calling us. For example, in your stamp, it should be done a conversation. I would like to open to the dialogue, the truth, the creativity, space of creativity, or I need to ask for help in a perspective. And I look at that as an opportunity. In that sense, what happens? I could also perceive some risks. For example, if I try a dialogue, it could fail, or if I try to express my creativity, it could be not understood. At the same time, the perception of the risks is a realistic perception. I perceive that the biggest danger is that I remain stuck. So the fear of the risks related to the risks, it's a kind of invitation, for example, to be careful, to prudence sometimes. Or, at the same time, the inner atmosphere is an atmosphere of trust, of confidence, because the goal, the opportunity, it's so important. And it's reasonable to take those risks. Very easy. So fear helps us also recognize some possible risks so that you can cope with wisdom. So maybe in a dialogue, I try, I start, how are you, and so on. And I'll try to see the signs if it works. At the same time, we are in a confident position that that opportunity is very important and it has to be taken. That's an example, of course, we have to discern the situation. That's an example, in any case, of a realistic fear that indicates some risks in an atmosphere of trust, of confidence, so that fear becomes prudence, becomes wisdom, and or helps wisdom. It can also disappear, of course, when I do the step. In any case, I perceive as a real risk that I remain stuck. Eh, okay. Uh, of course, when there are real risks, eh, the distorted perceptions, they lead us to a terrible pattern, actually, that we experience. That's an example here, the fear of making mistakes. Of course, I'm talking about an exaggerated fear of making mistakes. Uh, so that's not the kind of fear of trying to do things, carefully. I'm talking about the exaggerated fear of making mistakes, and the result of that is that we can remain stuck and blocked. normally there are problematic perceptions in this kind of dynamic. For example, perception like or a conviction: if I make a mistake, my life will be ruined, or I cannot go on, and the opinions of the others. It's very important. Also, this distorted fear, as we say in the module on thoughts and beliefs and feelings, it helps us recognize this inner pattern. So it's important also when fear is an echo of distorted perception. It is important to recognize this fear and to try to get in touch with the roots of that fear, so that you can bring those distorted perception to light, and yeah, to let them evolve and help us uh, to 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 make them evolve actually. So when we are stuck in this kind of fear, exaggerated fear of making mistakes that comes from deeper perceptions or convictions, of course, what happens? The convictions, these distorted convictions, are generally unconscious. So we, on a conscious basis, for example, we can experience a kind of situation, that kind, we feel that we're not enough, the conditions are not the best ones. We wait actually for a perfect clarity that doesn't exist. So we don't move anymore. We remain stuck. Stuck. And a typical, example is the yes, but. Yes, I would like, expression of a desire, but, huh? And authentic, uh, actually, realization of our life is beyond that fear. So it's a kind of dynamic, like the dynamic of willing. We avoid what gives life because we have, for example, afraid of making mistakes. So we avoid opportunities, we avoid meetings, and we repeat what hurts us. We avoid and we become more and more convinced that we're unable, that the situations are not ideal, the ideal ones. These are on a conscious or half conscious basis. On a deeper dimension or level, there are this kind of convictions. I cannot make mistakes. I'm not precious if I make a mistake, and so on. So we repeat the same faults, and we avoid opportunities, and we boycott our lives. The same toxic patterns, the same cycles. Yeah. So a question of discernment. What are you afraid of? Is it a fear that is really protecting you and indicating real dangers that we have to avoid? Of course, there are things that we have to avoid, dangerous addictions. Or is it fear pointing, mm, mm, pointing to some risk that we can, with confidence, actually face? Uh, or is that a fear that is preventing from love and life and so on? Of course, you can remember when the danger is not a real one, or it's a normal risk, that God uh, really mm, enter in relationship with you, and God tells you, don't be afraid. That doesn't mean that don't have to feel fear. It doesn't mean that it's not necessary to become imprisoned by fear. Not alone. He's helping you. Yeah, to not run away from life. Of course, do not be afraid of normal risks that can be faced and of life. So that don't be afraid is also a word that wants to destructure, deconstruct some inner patterns. Don't be afraid of things that are not dangerous. You perceive them as dangerous because of your convictions. So, yeah, the sun in your fear so that you can choose an act. The sun, what leads to life and what ruins it. Move away from what is toxic. Move toward life every day. Uh, Amen. This video of our inner journey, free heart, and see you soon. Mm. You will receive a lot of videos that will help you deepen themes of our journey.